We'll call to order the City Commission meeting of December 21st, 2015. The record should show that we have 4 commissioners present tonight, and to make that reality before we go into any of our regular business, I think we need to make official Mr. Frenzel's position on the commission. You going to take care of that, Mr. Kessel?
I certainly will. Commissioner Frenzel, would you join me at the podium? We'll share the same document here, but can you raise your right hand, please? Repeat after me. I, Joe Frenzel, do solemnly swear
I, Joe Frenzel, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the state of North Dakota,
and the state of North Dakota,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of City Commissioner of the City of Dickinson
of the office of City Commissioner of the City of Dickinson
to the best of my
to
ability.
the best of my ability.
Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Frenzel.
Again.
It'll be good to have you with us the next few months here. Okay, with that, do we have any changes to the order of business? Mr. Kessel or anybody?
We do not.
If not, we'll look for a motion to approve the agenda. And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. We'll then move to the consent agenda. Anybody have anything in the consent agenda that they'd like to discuss? If not, can we have a motion for approval?
Make that motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, we will vote. Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Oltmans?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel? Chair votes aye. That motion carries. We will move to the regular agenda. And first item on the regular agenda is a fee schedule amendment. Looks like Ms. Goss is going to introduce that.
Thank you, Mr. President and Commissioners. This is a resolution to amend the 2016 fee schedule to include brine rates. Our brine facility is up and running, and as was discussed when it was being built, we have sufficient brine to be able to sell to other government entities and private companies. So this just adds that to the fee schedule and has the different products. There are currently 15 products, and we have capabilities of 3 more, but these are the 15 that are currently up and running and ready for sale. This will be Resolution 15-2015, and staff recommends approval.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Goss? We're anticipating other communities, other cities, I suppose, for the most part.
And other political entities like the DOT.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay. Any other questions, comments? We'll look for a motion on 15-2015.
I'd make the motion to approve the Dickinson fee schedule for the brine.
We have a second.
Second.
Any more discussion? Not, we will vote. Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Oltmans?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. We are looking at an amendment for a first reading for an ordinance, employee benefits. Ms. Goss.
Yes, thank you. We were looking into the employee benefits, and one of the benefits that regular part-time employees do not currently have is holiday pay. All of the other benefits they have are prorated to their average weekly hours. So this ordinance adds the holiday pay, which would be done at the same rate as the other benefits, so prorated to an average weekly hours. We did take this to civil service, and they have recommended approval, as does city staff.
Okay. And ordinance number is
1602.
1602. Any questions or comments from commissioners? This is the first reading of an ordinance, so we will ask for comments from the public. We'll open that comment period right now. Is there anybody from the public who would like to comment on this proposed ordinance? Please step forward and make your comments now. Anybody from the public? If not, we'll close the public hearing and look for comments or a motion from commissioners.
I would make a recommendation to approve the first reading of ordinance 1602. I think it's an added benefit for the part-time employees. That's a hard position to fill sometimes, and I think adding this added benefit will go a long ways towards securing those positions.
Okay, we have a motion to approve first reading of 1602. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? If not, we will vote. Mr. Oltmans?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, the motion carries. We're looking at second reading on the taxi cab ordinance. Ms. Goss?
Yes, as we discussed last time, this proposed ordinance revises, or has 2 revisions. It allows dispatchers to ride along in the taxis for safety reasons, and it also changes the definition of bus or omnibus to 4 or more passengers, so those smaller vehicles that act in the same manner fit under that definition and that licensing. Staff recommends approval.
Okay, questions or comments from commissioners? If not, again, this is an ordinance proposal, so we will ask if there are comments from the public. Anybody from the public would like to comment on ordinance number 1600, please step forward. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and look for a motion.
I make the motion to approve the taxi cab ordinance.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on ordinance number 1600? If not, we will vote. Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Oltmans?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, the motion carries. And the tobacco ordinance, Ms. Goss?
Yes, this is also a second reading. It's ordinance number 1601. This changes the definition of tobacco to make it more strict. It includes anything that is derived from tobacco, contains nicotine, any similar substances, and the effect is to require the vape shops to have a city tobacco license, just like the other tobacco shops. City staff recommends approval.
Okay, thank you. Comments by commissioners? If not, we will open for comments from the public on ordinance number 1601 concerning tobacco sales. Anybody from the public would like to comment, please step forward. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and look for a motion on 1601.
Make a motion to approve ordinance 1601, second reading, final passage.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion on 1601? If not, we will vote. Mr. Oltmans?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. With that, we will move to our financial report and look to Mr. Maury.
Thank you, President Jackson and members of the commission. So today I have the financial reports as of November 30th, 2015, and I will get started right away with the general fund revenues. As you can see on the bottom line there, as of the end of November, we have $11.3 million in general fund revenues. That's about 63 of our initial $17.8 million projection. But what this slide doesn't show is that we have a $3.5 million transfer from Oil Impact that was just made this month in December, and also $1.7 million in administration fees from enterprise funds, which you're not seeing on here So with that 5.2 million that you're not seeing, we're at 16.5 million, and that'll put us at about 93% of our initial forecast. Moving on to the expenses. Again, we're at 15.3 million in expenses. The general government, public safety, and cultural service lines are all about 82 to 83% of their budgeted amount. The engineering and streets is at 92%. The transfers out have been completely done for the year out of the general fund, except for one transfer for retiree health insurance, which was made just last week. So you'll be seeing that in the next financial report. So overall, we spent 86% of the $17.8 million general fund expense budget. Moving on to the enterprise funds. As you can see, each one of these items, there hasn't been a lot of change from the beginning cash balance to the ending cash balance. Water and wastewater, they do have 20 million in capital outlays, but that will be offset by oil impact money and also some grant will have coming in. And stormwater and solid waste, you're seeing pretty consistent line from the beginning of the year to the end. A graph for our water utility sales for the year. This consists of consumption, meter charges, and connection fees. The reason you're seeing the trend going the direction it is, I think it could just be some type of timing issue. In October of 2014 until October of 2015, you're seeing almost 30 million gallon consumption increase. I think that just has to do with the timing of when it was recorded in our system. And then the reason you're seeing a downward trend in November, I think, is again because of that timing. I think if you take that timing out of it, I think October and November are pretty even plateau. And we're at 82% of our budget for water sales. Wastewater, pretty similar. It's one's a lot more of a flat line than the water sales was. It again consists of consumption, meter charges, and connection fees. And we're in wastewater, we're at 40%, 47% of our $5.2 million budget. Solid waste consists of actually 5 different accounts. We have utility billing, both commercial and residential, along with commercial landfill, gate receipts, and commercial container rent. Solid waste is also on a very even trend. We're at 84% of the $4.7 million budget. And I think it's going down just because we have small decreases in each of the 5 accounts. Nothing major, and it's just a slow downward trend, but it's not going to take any major effect. And then with the total utility sales, it's the total of the 3 graphs you just looked at, plus it takes stormwater utility billing into account. Stormwater doesn't have a large effect. It's usually between 14 and 16,000. And with our total utility sales, we're at 70% of our total 16.7 million that we had forecasted for 2015. Moving on to sales tax. I would like to mention before we start that this slide here, it's showing actually only 10 months of collections compared to 11 in 2014. Due to some changes made by the North Dakota State Treasurer's Office, the timing of how we recorded our sales tax, occupancy, and hospitality tax collections, you're seeing 10 months compared to 11 months strictly based on timing issues. So with that, we have 6.2 million collected so far as 10 months of collections. So with that, we should actually reach our total revenue goal for sales tax. The 50% portion, which is going to annual street projects, you're seeing the same percentages that you saw in the totals on the slide before. And the expenses for the 50% portion is simply a $4 million transfer that we have to the annual street project fund. So you won't see any changes in the expenses for this portion of the 1% sales tax. The 20% portion for job creation and other senior citizen programs We have a budget of $1,080,000 in expenses. We've nearly reached that, and I don't know if we'll even reach that amount of expenses. We're done with the only major transfer we had in that account. So you maybe see a small increase, but nothing major by the end of the year. And then the 30% portion. As you can see, we have $786,000 in expenses. That was a transfer made for one half of the West River Community Center bond payment. And then the other $600,000, which part of it is set aside for trails construction and part of it is set aside for other parks and rec improvements. Both of those transfers have been made in December, so they are completed and we are done. We shouldn't see any more expenses in the 30% portion for the remainder of the year. And then finally, in the 0.5% sales tax, we did make the transfer to the general fund of $1,036,000, but we have a $2 million transfer going to the building construction fund that has not yet been made. But other than that, that is also the last of the expenses that we should see in the 0.5% sales tax. Hospitality tax, the expenses you're seeing the other half of the West River Community Center bond payment that I just mentioned before. So this fund is also complete with its expenses for the year. And the $958,000 in collections that you're seeing is 92% of the total budget we have for the year. So we should also collect all the hospitality tax we had initially budgeted for.
Mr. Maury, could I get you to back up to the half-cent? Projected revenue to year end, $1 million?
That's just based on, we took our total revenue as well as we total budgeted at the beginning of the year, and we thought the best way that we could project our total revenues is just take our total budget amount minus what we actually collected. So that number probably is a little skewed, but again, it's based on 10 months of collections compared to 11 months in 24.
Okay, but we're only collecting $250 to $350 a month. So what will that do to that number in practical terms?
You know, it'll shorten it a little bit, but I can check into why. I'm not sure why there's that gap and that discrepancy that you're seeing. I'll look into that and I'll get back to you. Hopefully I can find a reason for that.
Okay, thank you.
And then moving on to occupancy tax. This is going to cover our museum operating expenses and our subsidies such as the Convention and Visitors Bureau. The $468,000 in revenue is 84% of the initial $560,000 that we had budgeted. And we're on pace to end fairly similar to what we initially forecasted. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of change from our beginning cash balance to our end cash balance. And then finally, we have the street projects funds. And this slide is also a little skewed. You're seeing a small amount of revenues compared to a large amount of expenses. And the reason that is you're not, this slide isn't taking into account all the oil impact money we had set aside specifically for those street projects. That transfer is going to be made this month. We're currently in the process of working on that to decide exactly how much we need to transfer to get the most efficient and effective way to use those oil impact funds. So that any cash balance should be zeroed out at the end of 2015. So if there's any questions at this point, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions for Mr. Maury? I have a general one for Mr. Maury or Mr. Kessel. We're going to be meeting a week from today with a special meeting for reforecast. How many of these slides will we be able to see next Monday that will recognize the transfers and some of the other things that really do skew some of these reports so badly.
I can try to put something together for you to kind of show what you're seeing today compared to what you'll see on Monday, just to give you an idea of the difference between, and the difference that those reforecasts will actually.
There are a number of numbers in here that are, there's really some gaps between budget numbers and where we see revenue coming in. For example, the enterprise funds, the total utility numbers, it looks like we're going to probably be $4 million short of budget numbers. I realize that that's what the meeting next Monday is for, but I hope we can see enough detail that we can understand better. It's hard to get your arms around this time of year when we, haven't made the transfers and all. Some of the numbers are concerning. So I hope that you can give us some comfort level, at least in understanding them next Monday.
I do think the picture will become quite clear, Commissioner Jackson, once you see the transfers being made. I think the appropriate word is struggled with making these transfers on a timely basis throughout the year. So I can understand your hesitancy or your lack of confidence.
Well, the lack of transfers does show up in the reports here,
Yep.
so you can see it, but I don't think those transfers are going to affect our enterprise funds, for example, to the degree that we'd maybe like them to. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Mr. Maury. We should have a motion to accept the financial report.
So moved.
Any more discussion? Financial report? Not, we'll vote. Mr. Oltmans.
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel.
Aye.
Mr. Decker.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. Thanks very much, Mr. Moore. Okay. Let's try to get the human resource contract in, Mr. Kessel.
President Jackson, prior to doing that, we have a numbering issue that we have to deal with, and I think Attorney Goss would like to address that with you quick.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to go back up to item 4B, the employee benefits ordinance. It's actually ordinance number 1603,
Okay.
not 1602. So we would need a motion to amend that.
Do you want to word that motion for us, Ms. Goss?
It would just be to amend the employee benefits ordinance to be ordinance number 1603 instead of 1602.
Okay. Who would like
So
to make
moved.
that motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Not, we'll vote. Mr. Oltmans.
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel.
Aye.
Mr. Decker.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. Go ahead, Mr. Kessel. Let's try to do this.
Thank you, President Jackson. Commission, back in November, I mentioned to you that as a city staff, we had attempted on a couple different occasions to revise the HR code section of our city ordinance. We did that without a lot of success because we got bogged down in details. Each time we tried it with a large audience, lots of input. That didn't work. So we tried a smaller group, less people, less input, and then we were going to bring the document as a draft to the larger audience. We also got bogged down there. So rather than attempting a third time to revise this with city staff, it's my recommendation that we go outside of our city staff members and hire an HR specialist to assist us with these revisions. We've identified Coling Human Resource Associates to assist us. I've met with Mr. Coling on 2 different occasions. Cal Coling was on our Civil Service Commission for many years, so he has a special insight into the document itself, was probably part and parcel involved in its recommendations made to this body on changes. And it is with that intent that I'd like to present the contract with Coling Human Resources Associates to revise our HR manual. There'll be a special emphasis on the role of civil service, our safety policy, our progressive discipline policy, amongst other things. It was difficult to put in the scope of work that you see before you a dollar figure, and so what we settled on is an hourly rate that would be charged. There would be interim versions of the manual that would be brought forward. The working team would be myself, Attorney Goss, and HR Coordinator Namanak that would work with him specifically on details with regard to the document itself. So he'll have approximately 8 to 16 hours per week to work on that project. There is no timeline in terms of an ending date. We're more interested in quality and getting it right than we are in getting it done timely. So it is with that I present the contract to you with a recommendation to approve. I'll answer any questions you may have.
Okay, and I think that 2 or 3 meetings ago, we gave our concurrence for the concept of
You did, yes.
of contracting this out. So really what we're doing tonight is approving the detail of this contract with Mr. Colin.
That's exactly correct, President Jackson.
So any comments or questions on the contract from city commissioners? If not, we'll look for a motion to approve the contract.
And make the motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not, we'll vote. Mr. Decker.
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel.
Aye.
Mr. Oltmans.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. Okay, we will move to timetable agenda. We have a timetable item at 4:55, Appreciation Day for Government. Now, Mr. Kessel, do you want to introduce this at all, or should we just?
I
Mr.
think we've
Fay?
got a group of students here that Mr. Fay will present. Have them introduce themselves when they come up, and
Great.
I'm looking forward to the presentation.
Please step forward. And welcome.
My name is Mark Michelson. I'm currently student body president of Dickinson High School as well as National Honor Society president. I'm a senior this year.
I'm Olivia Fielder. I'm vice president of the National Honor Society and junior class president of student council. And I'm Susanna Moberg. I'm a senior. I'm a member of the National Honor Society and I'm the student council from
We're here tonight to honor and thank you for all you do in the community, for our community and our school. For the past 2 years, the Dickinson High School and Social Studies Department and students have been recognizing people in our school and community that make a difference to the lives of others. We have recognized custodial staff, administrative assistants, paraprofessionals, and administration within our own school.
We have also thanked and recognized our booster club, neighbors of our school, park board representatives, and tonight we're here to thank you for all you do to make our community a great place to live and our school a great and safe place to be. Our students and social studies teachers have put together some goodie bags for you to say thank you for the service and to wish you all Merry Christmas. Thank you for your time and service. We can't thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for the thank you.
We have a poster too.
Very nice.
Great.
Thank you.
I hope you're getting that on camera.
Thank you so much.
I do have one question of the three of you.
Was the art class involved in this part of the project, or was this still show?
I just know I
Oh.
wasn't. I'm not any artistic.
Looking at the three of you, is it possible that we have 3 potential city commission candidates a few years from now?
Possibly.
Well, I think you should think about that. Thanks very much. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being here. Okay, we'll move to our 5 o'clock timetable agenda item. Mr. Kessel with the downtown presentation.
Thank you very much, President Jackson. I apologize for not being able to provide this presentation to you last week when it would have made more sense with our agenda items. I'm glad to be able to do that for you today. As you are aware, we hired Gary Reddick and V3 Studios to help us with the visioning process for our downtown. We've met several times and regularly with the Downtown Dickinson Association. We continue to do that on a monthly basis. And this is kind of a culmination of work that has been completed by Mr. Reddick with input from the Downtown Association and others. So I'm going to provide you with an abbreviated version of the complete PowerPoint just based on time. What you see before us is an effort to try and really define what the downtown is. Obviously, that's the first thing that you have to do when you're looking at ways in which to revitalize the downtown area. What you see designated here in the red is primarily the existing downtown. There is also some other areas that are adjacent to the downtown that are identified that can have a large impact on the downtown area. The largest, of course, in the brownish color labeled number 1 is the Dickinson State University. I think we're all aware of the impact that NDSU has had when they relocated some of their programs to the downtown in Fargo. We certainly have a similar opportunity for us here in Dickinson. You'll also notice some of the other assets that are adjacent or in the middle of the downtown area, including the post office, the courthouse, city hall, and so forth. There is a dashed area that's represented on the east side of the larger red area, and that is V3 Studios' recommendation to include inside the downtown area. So if we're going to define downtown, they recommend adding those 5 blocks. This also is fairly similar to our existing Renaissance zone, the red spacing on that document. The legislature has allowed us some additional blocks, and so we're working diligently to take advantage of adding those blocks to the Renaissance zone. So that 5-block area that has been recommended is an area that we're looking at. Also potentially broadening the Renaissance zone area east to west along Villard is another area that we're looking hard at. This is a closer picture of the downtown and further defining the core. That large area represents a growth potential for the downtown, and the yellow area represents our downtown core. So that's where the majority of our businesses are located. If we're looking at improvements to the area, that core is probably the first phase where most of the so-called low-hanging fruit would exist. So that would be our primary focus, would be that yellow area and the downtown core. So what we tried to do then is identify opportunities for growth in that downtown core. And what you're seeing here, mostly in the red, is surface parking lots. These are all areas that have the largest potential for growth because they're simply underutilized areas in the community. The blue areas are cultural hotspots, I'll call them, and I mentioned them earlier. It's things like the post office, the courthouse, city hall, things of that nature. So this slide is really meant to show first phase opportunity in that downtown core area. And then what this slide tries to do is give you more of a 3D representation of what it could look like. If we took advantage of all the opportunities that do exist in the downtown area by putting buildings on those surface parking lots, this is a potential of what our downtown could look like. Now, in order to do this, in order to take those surface parking lots out of use, so to speak, we have to account for parking in a different manner. So in a couple of these different structures, there's actually a parking garage located within some of these buildings. And I'll speak more to that as we go forward with the presentation. And then what this does is it takes the 3D rendering of buildings and tries to incorporate what they could look like. It tries to give some depth of image onto those buildings so that you can actually see them as structures. And there's a variety of heights in here. But the majority, we try to stick to 2 and maybe 3-story buildings. That's kind of what our downtown is, with a few exceptions. And so it tries to create some homogeneity to the product. But it makes them, it allows you to visualize what could happen in the downtown by adding the depth of color and size to those structures. What this slide is meant to represent is if we take advantage of all those opportunities in Phase 1 growth, what's next? Where's Phase 2? And the areas that are kind of labeled in pink would be the Phase 2 or proposed Phase 2 improvements. So you can see that you're starting to move away from your core and primarily east and west with a little bit of north and south development along Villard and other downtown streets. This is starting to identify your corridors. You have certain corridors that exist naturally within our community. For instance, the blue area that you see, it's kind of the government corridor. You start with the railroad building, you move up to the post office, city hall, and then the county courthouse. So when you're looking at that corridor, one of the things that we want to focus on is walkability. You want to focus on multimodal transportation in the whole downtown, but certainly this specific north to south area is where we would probably want to enhance our walkability issues within the downtown specifically. The green area represents our connections or potential connections with DSU and trying to bring that university component to the downtown. I think we could actually move that green area even a little further to the east because I think the type of vitality that could be added to the downtown, the spirit of the college students would really make an impact on the downtown area. The larger kind of mustard gold color is currently labeled entertainment, and one of the reasons you might ask yourself, well, that seems a little odd where that's at, but as you progress in the evolution of the downtown area, one of the things that's proposed is a downtown event center. And with the other location that was being considered was where the TR Library has now settled their sights on locating. And so there's a large component that would like to see a 3,000 to 5,000 seat event center focused in the downtown area. If that happens, you get ancillary businesses that want to be close to that because of tailgating, because of events that would happen in that event center. So restaurants, bars, and things that really want to be close to events. The other thing that you'll notice on this slide is some purple circles. And what we tried to do is identify where people would access the downtown. And you try to do that so that you can identify wayfinding. Where do you put signs to make sure that people understand where assets are, how to get to City Hall, how to get to the post office, how to get to this place or that place, the event center specifically. So you want to focus on those entry points and make sure that they look good, that they're inviting, and that people are excited when they enter the downtown area. This is the slide that we started to look at specifically where a downtown square could be. Where do you want the living room of your community to be? And that's really what the downtown square functions as. And it identifies street improvements. If we're going to really look at how to make the downtown functional from a multimodal standpoint so that pedestrians feel safe, so that interactions between people walking, people biking, people driving in the downtown, we minimize any kind of accidents. These are the areas that we would like to focus on specifically. And then this is a potential of what the downtown square could look like. The location is immediately to the east of the Brick House Grill. We do have part of this land is under city ownership today, but it expands that corner, takes over the alleyway, and it does actually take over a couple of buildings that exist, and they would be replaced with the downtown square. You can see a lot more greenery. You can see also the use of alleys, not only for access but also for improvement in this design. I'd like to point your attention to the kind of the white trapezoidal type feature, and what that is a stage. It's the cover for where the stage is. But where all those circles are labeled, that stage can be moved. It's portable, and so depending upon your audience, how large of an audience you think it is, you can move that stage around to create intimacy if that's what you want. Or the way it's focused today is the largest audience. So if we were to move, for instance, the Live at 5 event that's currently happening in the downtown to here, they could take advantage of the rest of the downtown square. There's also in the bottom left-hand corner a kind of a bluish feature. That's a water feature. That's a water jet that would shoot water up. It's intended to be active. It's intended for people to actually use that. You can have kids. You can have people actually walking through that water feature during the summertime. The larger circle that is kind of gray in nature right next to the stage, that's actually depressed. It's lower than the rest of the area. Not by much, but enough that you could actually flood that in the winter times, and that becomes an ice skating rink. And then that building just south of the water feature could also be the warming house. That's a fully glassed feature structure that is meant to house things that would support events in the downtown area. Like I mentioned, if it's an ice skating rink, then that's where you check out your skates. That's where you come to buy your hot chocolate or to warm up from the elements. You'll also notice that there's some bump outs on the ends of the street. So if you look at Villard specifically and Sims, you'll notice that there's some bump outs at those corners. What that's meant to do is allow for a shorter distance for pedestrians to cross that street. It also tends to slow traffic down because it has the effect of narrowing the street itself. So there are some, that the Villard is we'd have to incorporate the DOT to make sure that their approval of this project would be garnered. So that's an idea of what a downtown square could look like. The next slide will show you a daytime summer look to the grounds, or it could. There you go. You notice that there's a lot of greenery added, and you'll also notice the yellow canopies. Those are meant to be rooftop bars where if there are events in the downtown, and that's what makes this successful, is programming. And that's why we tried to time this presentation, and I should have been here at the last meeting with the Downtown Association, because this square is only successful if it's programmed, if there's events that are going on a regular basis. You'll also notice that there's two kind of white structures there at the end of Sims. Those are functional as well. They're not just there as a indicator of our downtown, but when we have an event where we have to close Sims off to traffic, those white bars actually fall down or are lowered, I should say, to stop cars from traveling north and south on Sims. And then this is a winter picture of what it could look like. You notice the large Christmas tree, and then now it is flooded and there is skating going on. So this is a vision. This is something that we could see in the downtown with an investment. We have approached the Dickinson Downtown Association and let them know that in order to create an investment of this variety, there has to be private investment. This can't be simply a publicly forwarded event or structure. There's got to be input and buy-in from the whole downtown and the community. We've requested that number be at least $2 to $2.5 million to show their level of support for a structure such as this. And then what this does is it starts to show, you saw some 3D renderings of buildings. And this one is specifically across from City Hall. It's the parking lot, the surface parking lot that's there. And it's just meant to show what this could be. We're trying to encourage mixed-use development. What we mean by that is on the first floor of these structures, there would be commercial buildings. We'd really like to see professional services maybe move to the second floor buildings or even higher, and that the first floor is retail, it's commercial structures, bars, things of that nature, and more professional services are moved up to the higher levels of a building. Second and third floor of this specific building are public parking. If we eliminate those surface parking lots, we have to make sure that we replace those with at least an equal amount of parking places, but also add places for the development that's going to happen. And so that's what this does. It adds 2 layers of public parking. Again, it's an example. It could be 3 layers. It just depends upon the need and upon the mixed-use nature of the structure itself. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that in this version, it's residential. These are all apartment units that could be created on floors 4 and 5. In this version, it is a 5-story building, so you'd have commercial again on the first floor, you'd have second and third floor parking, and fourth and fifth floor would be residential in nature. So if you go to the next slide, you can kind of see that structure as I just mentioned it, and then the next slide puts a facade on it and what that could look like. One of the things that I really wanted to point out in this picture itself is the second and third story. It's pretty hard to tell if there's a parking lot there, and that would be one of our goals, is to try to hide that parking from the general street goer, so that you really can't see it. It's accessible from the back side of the building. Well, it's where the entrances are. There is an entrance. You can kind of see it on the left-hand side there, but it's not prominent. Next slide. We've done the exact same thing for the land that the city owns on the west side of the American Bank Center and just north of the what's referred to as the old Elks building. The old City Hall was located on that site, and the former, where Wells Fargo was as well. Very similar type of mixed-use structure. In this case, the eastern half of the building, the one that faces American Bank Center, that first floor again is commercial, but the west side is actually where the parking starts. So in this version, the parking is on the first floor as well as the second floor. And then you can move up from there and be either commercial again or residential in nature. So, but it's meant to give an idea. It's meant to give a vision. It's help you to create a potential that could exist in our downtown. Obviously, when you look at this type of investment, there's a revenue stream that's generated from the property tax. Surface parking lots really don't generate a revenue stream. They're a cost center to us as a city. You move to something like this, and now with the addition of commercial, obviously there's some sales tax revenue, there's property tax revenue. We would have to create a parking authority, most likely, to deal with the parking that would be created in terms of the multiple stories there, and it's not inexpensive. I want to be realistic. Creating a parking structure costs between $25,000 to $30,000 a stall, or it can, and so it is a venture that really has to be thought out, and proper investments vetted, and contract signed. So that's really what I wanted to present in terms of the downtown. Wanted to make sure that I answered any questions that the commission may have. We've talked about this for a couple years now, and I'm excited to work on these kinds of projects. I'll try to answer any questions.
Who has questions? Mr. Kessel?
I have a few on the slides there. The downtown zone extends into, or historic area, I guess, extends down in across the railroad tracks down to TMI. How is that considered a Renaissance?
Actually, the Renaissance Zone, Commissioner Decker, goes even further south than that.
Right, I think it ends about where the Broadway Bar is, or what used to be called the Broadway Bar, right?
We had a HIF building that was created even south of that. It's actually down by, across the street to the east of Rosie's. So it does, our current Renaissance Zone goes fairly far south. And when our Renaissance Zone was created, the timeline for that plan is approaching, and we'll have some documents and some presentations for you to refigure that Renaissance Zone. And our thought and our recommendation is most likely going to be to kind of flatten that Renaissance Zone out and make it go
East-west.
further east and west on Ballard rather than north and south.
Okay.
Mr. Kessel, it's, the concepts are interesting. I think they would be to anybody. Making something happen will be the devil in the detail, of course, and it seems to me that these things aren't going to happen without the presence of the developer really shouldering a project or projects. What are you thinking? What are the downtown folks thinking? It's one thing to have the concepts, but how is something going to happen?
Well, first of all, I have to say I completely agree, President Jackson. I think the private sector really needs to be the initiative behind these improvements. We are seeing investment in the downtown already in some of those private buildings. Mr. Marsh is in the audience. He's one of those people who's invested in his structure. The Brickhouse Grill is invested. There's been other things. We met last month with the owners of the former hotel downtown and looking at what that can be. These are all exciting things. These are all momentum-building projects. And we have some natural, well, let me put it a different way. We have some products in our downtown that most downtowns lose, like a grocery store. That is something that is oftentimes lost in most downtowns, and then they try to regain that after time. And I'd like to take advantage of that because it encourages residential property. And I think in order for the downtown to really get some momentum, we need to create more residential structures in the downtown area, or we need people to live there. That vitality only comes with use, and that programming, creating the downtown square, and creating housing opportunities for people to live and take advantage of what's available, I think are the two areas that we need to focus on the most. But I completely agree that the private sector has to lead that charge. And we use Renaissance Zone, we use other incentives to help them make that a success.
Okay. Well, I thought that the report, if you will, that the Downtown Association gave last week was really good. And maybe for now, we could look for an update a couple of times a year. I think it'd be good to hear from the downtown people a couple times a year, so we keep it on the burn, keep people talking about it.
Excellent. I know they're more than willing to take on the charge. When we mentioned the investment from the private sector of 2 to 2.5, one of the members thought, oh, that'll be easy. So hopefully that rings true.
Okay, anything else from commissioners? Well, that will be a good segue into our 5:15 timetable agenda item. Ms. Gillen?
Thought you were going to bring me a footstool, Rita.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, good evening. What a great introduction when you talked about the devil is in the details. I visited with Sean a few weeks ago, or Mr. Kessel a few weeks ago after he missed the last meeting, and I said, there's a lot of resources out there for the downtown businesses in our community, and I suspect a lot of them don't know about them. And he immediately said, well, why don't you come and tell us about them? So I said, sure, I'm here. So what I did was I sent you a courtesy review report of just a few of the examples, and my hope is to mainly inform the downtown people. But again, there's a lot of other businesses who could benefit, whether they're in the downtown district or not. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity to really kind of just talk about some of the things that could be helpful.
Ms. Kellen, if you would, for the folks on TV, why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm
Tell them
sorry.
who you're with.
I'm sorry. I'm Rayanne Keelan. I'm the director of the Strom Center at Dickinson State University. We're an entrepreneurial center. We provide services to small businesses, entrepreneurs, and communities in southwestern North Dakota. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shame on me. That being said, some of the resources that are available to the small businesses are in the handout that was provided to you. Coming in May, USDA Rural Development has what they call their Rural Business Development Grants. As I was listening to your presentation, Mr. Kessel, I couldn't help but think of this program, because this is a wonderful program for small businesses or ag producers, just to be fair, to tap into, and it can be used for technical assistance with feasibility studies, business planning, market research, product service improvement types things. It can also be used somewhat for pollution control and abatement. Not as familiar with that application as I am the feasibility studies. So if you've got some of those downtown, or anybody in the community who's looking at maybe building that building across the street in the empty parking lot, and they need to understand, is it feasible? Would it work? This is a program that they can tap into. It is a competitive grant that's awarded. There are set-aside dollars for southwestern North Dakota, and we, or the city, can be an eligible application or an eligible applicant on behalf of the small business or the ag producer. Never want to forget the ag producer in this. But that's a great example if there's an opportunity for someone. Another one that's important to understand is the Rural Energy for America Program, Renewable Energy Systems and Energy Efficiency Improvement Grants. Long name, another USDA program, but that program is a wonderful program in that if you have an existing structure that you would like to do energy improvements on, whether you're going to do lighting, heating, air conditioning, windows, doors, anything building envelope, anything related to insulation, sometimes a roof. It's kind of hard to tell. That program can be tapped into, and that program will provide a 25% grant for those improvements. That program can also be used for new construction if you're going to do I'm not going to use a word I don't really totally understand, but if you were to put in thermal heating systems, the underground thermal heating system, something like that, or if you were going to do something solar, that could be tapped into. Both of these programs typically close about May, so I would say if there's interest, get it out there. The USDA program on the Rural Energy for America program is every year available. Every year we typically have the USDA funds for the Rural Business Development Grants. They are competitive, not so much with the energy efficiency ones. We've been encouraged to try to bring applicants from this region because there are set-aside dollars specifically for this region that carry forward from a long time ago when we were suffering from migration. So we're still eligible. Let's make sure we take advantage of these things. They take a little bit of planning, they take a little bit of doing, but they are resources that can be very helpful. I visited with Galen Baker from Stark Development the other day. They've just approved a new business development grant, and he said more information will be coming, but there may be some application of that grant program to help some of our small businesses or our downtown businesses. We certainly want to keep an eye on that. There are many of you might be familiar with the PACE buy-down programs. There's also a Flex PACE program. We've used it heavily in our community on childcare and housing the last few years, but they can also be used for non-competitive businesses, if there would be a need for some interest buy-down. That becomes very important when you're trying to leverage multiple loans during those initial years of the investment. That's another resource that's available. Of course, you've already mentioned, Mr. Kessel, the Renaissance Zone. It's a great program. The important reminder for small businesses wanting to access that, you need to make application prior to the investment, whether it's the purchase or the renovations. You can't get started and then go back and apply for those benefits, but that is a great source. It also has some trickle down for leasees. So if you've got the opportunity to purchase or renovate or do something substantial to a building in the Renaissance Zone, or you plan to lease, and this is also for homeowners in the Renaissance Zone. So if you're someone who is looking at building or redeveloping something into mixed use, as you've talked about, this is a great program that might be able to help you leverage with some state income tax breaks, and I'm not the expert there, but I just know enough to be dangerous. Then I wanted, and they chuckle. I also want to tell you that there's a lot of gap financing programs that are available. Roosevelt Custer Regional Council here in Dickinson has gap financing. Southwest REAP has a very favorable 0% interest microloan that can be used to gap finance. Gap finance becomes very important, as you know, when you're trying to put these projects together because, God darn it, those banks just don't want to give you everything you need. And sometimes you need a little bit of strength behind your applications. And so these come in very nicely and wrap in a second and third position to make projects work. Lake Agassiz Certified Development Corporation has developed a low-interest downtown development loan for southwestern North Dakota specifically, and they're going to come in, I think they'll go up to about $25,000, $50,000 at 4% interest. So there's some favorable programs out there to help put these packages together. I could go on and on about the different things that are available. We always keep an eye on the grants that are available. When you talk about that downtown civic area, sometimes through tourism, through the North Dakota Department of Commerce, sometimes through different art programs like Art Place, there are grants that are available that can help in different ways. So the point of my being here was to tell you more about these resources, make you aware of them, not only as leaders in our community, but for those behind me. If I turn around, then the mic doesn't hear me, and the people at home don't hear me. So any of our small businesses, especially in the downtown, there are resources that can help you further those dreams. We're happy to help. Give us a call. Get to any of these partners. Call Mr. Kessel. He can track us down. We'd like to be able to be part of making some of that come happening in our community. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Any questions?
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Keelan? I think it is good that you were here making everybody more aware of some of what's out there. And you probably have a phone number that people can use.
I probably do. You can either reach me at 701-483-2756, that's the Strom Center, or you can visit our website, www.stromcenter.com. We would love to be able to, we're already working with a few of the downtown folks, we'd love to be able to get more resources into our community to make these things happen.
Great.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very
Miss-
much for being
Oh,
here.
Commissioner Jackson, I have
I'm
one-
sorry.
That's one question. What, in terms of accessing these grants, I'm sure, or these programs, I'm sure they're all probably a little bit different, but what would you say is the average lead time for somebody interested? Is it a month? Is it 3 months? Is it more than that?
I would say that ideally, you want to have 3 to 6 months to adequately plan. Sometimes you're going to need match, and that match may be coming from yourself, it may need to come from the community. And you're right, every one of them has a little bit of a difference. What we don't want to see is a run-on a month before, a week before the grant is due, because it's not realistic to even provide those services. We like to have enough time to really sit down, understand what your needs are, and really understand which of these programs, if any of them, are going to work for your project. So the more time, the better. Knowing that we have the funding coming from USDA this spring, and knowing that there's a pretty good set aside for southwestern North Dakota, we want to make sure we get ahead of that. Those are a little bit painful to complete. In some cases, you can apply directly. In some places, you need a fiscal agent. So there's a lot of reasons that we want to start working on them early.
And then one last question, if I may. How do you determine, or how is it determined, not eligibility, but award? Is that done locally? Is that done at, I know, again, you have a multitude of programs here. Is it first come, first serve? Is it based on quality of application?
I'm going to go the easy answer first. Stark Development is going to be a conversation with Mr. Baker at Stark Development to understand whether you fit into the parameters, and more than likely an application to his board for approval. They meet monthly, and I would assume that he would want those applications a good 2 weeks in advance, just so that he can get them on the agenda. You definitely want to talk to Mr. Baker before you came in, just so that you can understand what might work and how to be best. Same thing with the Bank of North Dakota and the flex-based buy-down programs. Those are things that kind of are fluid and move. Renaissance Zone moves around. Gap financing comes, there's no deadlines. On the rural development grants, those are first scored by the state USDA staff. We don't even get into the national pool on that. Typically, there's a certain amount of money that's allocated to our region, and once that money has been exhausted, they give us a pretty thorough scoring system so that we can pre-score applicants and understand whether they're a good applicant before we even submit it. We've had some good success. We've had, you don't have any success if you don't try, but we've brought some good money back to the region for businesses through those programs, but they are competitive, more so within the region. Is that what you were hoping for an answer?
Thank you. I just wanted to get the word out that these decisions are made locally or statewide at best, and so they're familiar with what's going on in North Dakota and what's going on in Dickinson, North Dakota. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ms. Gill.
You bet.
Okay, we have a 5:30 agenda item. North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Counties. Ms. Steiner, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Vicki Steiner. I represent the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties, and it's 141 members, 19 counties across western North Dakota. Sean Kessel serves on our 11-member board representing the City of Dickinson's interest and a Hub City interest. We do have a slide presentation, if they could start that now.
Aaron, do you have that? Excuse me, just a second. Yeah.
What we're working on, even with the oil price dip, our executive committee met last week in Killdeer, and they decided that we still need to bring forward some concrete data on what's happening, because we know that it's going to be a legislative session that you're going to need some data. The association will need to bring forward some data, and they've done it in the past and had quite a bit of success when they bring data. This is not asking for engineering costs, this is just asking for data you already have in your system. So the association board met last week in Killdeer, as I said, and they approved $125,000 of association money to cost share and perform a core city impact forecast. And as you can see there on the slide, it's Dickinson, Watford City, Williston, Tioga, Stanley, and Killdeer. We're going to meet with each of those 6 core cities. We've already had indications from Williston and Watford City that they're interested, and we wanted to take advantage of working with you early because we want the data to be finished by June. The governor, as you know, builds his budget in July, and there are some interim legislative committees who would be interested in seeing this data. Up to $25,000 of this funding is available for the City of Dickinson to cost share in compiling impact forecasting analysis and financial gap analysis. And as you know, in the gross production tax formula, there are actually a couple sections where Dickinson receives revenue. One of them is in the central part of the formula. There's a number called 9% that the hub cities receive, and Dickinson's share is 30% of that 9%. Now, that number 9% could possibly be discussed in the future of whether it's enough. Is it working? Do you have enough, as your city grows, and I'm talking to all cities, as all cities in the West grow, does the money that is returned in the state oil formula, is it meeting your needs? Is it keeping up with where you're at financially? And if it isn't, is the number 9 correct? That question will be asked. And so we're trying to get a handle on just 6 core cities. We didn't have enough money, obviously, to do every city in the West. So these results we feel will be a critical tool moving forward. We did a study in 2014 that had impact, a tremendous positive impact. We did have some surge funding that came back as a result of a study that we did, and that study was kind of a historical look back on how many permits were given in the various cities, and just trying to show rapid growth and the challenges that not only Dickinson had, but other cities in the West. So we're going to build upon that, and you may be aware that the Department of Mineral Resources has a workforce and a job study that should be coming out in April, I believe. And then also Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute has another study they're doing on roads and looking at maintenance of roads. And those studies will be also compiled with this study as well, to kind of give an overall statistical picture of where are we at now in the West. And what we're looking at also, you know, the gross production tax was also changed from 25% to 30% to the locals. And that 5% increase is going to be probably evaluated on whether 5% was the right number. Should it have been 10? Should it have been 15% more? So we believe it's probably insufficient, that extra 5%. It probably should have been a little bit more, a greater number. And so that's the other thing, that you cannot really go in and visit with state stakeholders unless you have some a data behind that you can discuss with them. So these are what we're looking at. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Sean Gaddy from Nexus, who is going to be compiling the template and bringing in the data that these cities have. And I'd like Sean to come up and explain as he moves forward on that. Sean?
Thank you, Vicki. Good evening. As Vicki mentioned, my name is Sean Gaddy. I am the general manager of AE2S Nexus. We are a company, actually a registered municipal advisory firm, focused on working with utility enterprises and municipalities, looking at things such as funding development, financial analyses. We do quite a bit of asset management related work, and all of that kind of is comprised in what we're working to develop with the association for this work, as well as the participating cities. Really, when we think about the type of work that we're asking you to participate in tonight, we've got some fancy words up here and things, but really what we're looking at is what I would call a long-term revenue adequacy evaluation, and appropriately documenting all of the background information that develops that revenue adequacy. The city of Dickinson, along with all of the other impacted cities out in the west right now, you have a number of revenues that are available to you, but you also have a number of expenses that are stacking up as well. And really looking at a long-term forecast between a 1 or 2 or 3 year budgeting process. What we're proposing is a 6-year analysis to show, as Vicki discussed, as we look at those state revenues, are they going to be sufficient to meet the needs, and really justifying that analysis with some good hard fact-based data. And so we have up here kind of the progression in terms of how we look at these studies and the various things that we're analyzing, but really it comes down to what growth do you expect to realize. Vicki very briefly mentioned some of the work that the Department of Mineral Resources, as well as North Dakota State University, is currently performing. To characterize that and how that information will be useful and how we intend to build upon it, the work itself, the Department of Mineral Resources is currently performing price-dependent forecasts, which, as I've seen, or as I've discussed to this point with Lynn Helms, they're really looking at the break-even point of oil by location throughout the Bakken. And so if you think about it being very, at the current price, it's still being profitable to produce, or near profitable. We're actually getting down to the lower end of that in like the Watford City area. They've developed forecast pricing for if oil hits $40, $50, $60 per barrel. Where do they expect activity to start picking up in terms of drilling? And then upon that drilling, they're also working with North Dakota State University, and NDSU and their Applied Economics Department is working with Mineral Resources as well as with Vision West to look at that type of data that the Department of Mineral Resources is developing, to start developing price-dependent forecasts for the workforce. And along with workforce comes population. And so looking at those things, taking into consideration where oil is at today and where it's expected to go over the next few years, not just the next 6 months. I know that's a little bit draconian if we think about that forecast, but the resource isn't going anywhere. And so what we're really talking about doing is looking beyond the next 6 months for when that activity picks up again. How will it most likely pick up, and in what locations, and then how do we develop data around that? And all of that's in that front end piece, which is the development and growth projections. Really analyzing some of that information in detail to look at if it's $50 a barrel, what type of demands will that place on a city like Dickinson for the services you offer. So looking at housing unit additions, looking at infrastructure additions, comparing that to the current plans you currently have on hand, and compiling all that together to create some fact-based information from which that we can develop some financial projections. Not just looking at the state revenue sources, but helping to demonstrate how you plan to utilize your revenues currently at the local level. You hear a lot of times from various decision makers, policy makers, where they start to talk about the tax base of the city growing so robustly that what are you going to do with all that property tax revenue? Well, it's probably one of the more minor revenues that you have at your disposal, and considering that it lags quite significantly from the time a building permit's pulled to the time that you're actually collecting revenue, that lag inherently creates a gap in terms of the money that you can generate. And so looking at property tax revenues, looking at utility revenues, a lot of the information that was just being reviewed in your financial report, taking that and extending it on a more of a macro level to help stack up all of the expenses you would expect to incur versus all of the revenues you have at your disposal, including those state revenues. Ultimately, in the end, what we suspect we'll see is a gap, and performing an analysis around that. Just a little bit more information around the type of information that we will be developing. Obviously, as you think about capital improvements plans, it's oftentimes easy to shock and awe someone with a big capital improvements number. And when I say that, you hear numbers like $1 billion for Williston and what they're looking at over the next 6 years. We've actually been doing quite a bit of work with Williston and have performed a very similar analysis for them as to what we're proposing here tonight and asking you to participate in, where we've taken not just their capital improvements plan, but we've looked closely at how will those capital improvements needs, how will those growth needs that are being experienced in Williston, how will they drive city service needs? And what you can see here is our current forecast for staffing projections for Williston to the year 2020. In 2015, that was our projected number there. Actually, I think they realized about 200 or hired to a level of about 270 full-time equivalents. But what we're looking at is ultimately by the year 2020, if they grow as projected to a population of somewhere around 50,000 people, Williston needing about 460 employees. A lot of cost comes with that when you think about space, when you think about fleet, when you think about all of those different things that are centered around just the employees you need to deliver the services to your residents. A lot of that, how we kind of came up with that number, is based on benchmarking analyses. In the instance of Williston, and what we're proposing to do in Dickinson, is taking some similar upper Midwestern cities and analyzing for the growth scenarios that we would develop, analyzing if Dickinson is to add 5,000, 10,000 people, you'll start to look and feel or grow through like a West Fargo or similar in size like a Bozeman, Montana. We have a lot of data generated currently from our past work where we'd start to develop ratios and projection numbers for across your various layers of government, across your organizational chart, where will staff be needed to continue to deliver those services, and then what costs come around, what costs come with that in order to help us drive our forecasts, our financial forecasts that we're looking to develop. Obviously, there's operating expenses and things that come in as well that need to be considered. I won't say we're performing a capital improvements plan, but what we would be looking at is a capital improvements type analysis for the projects that are out there. What funding do you have at your disposal? What gaps are there in that funding to show the additional need? To get away from that shock and awe when it comes to capital improvements numbers, and really what is left to be met as far as that need and funding those CIP needs. All of that is, as I mentioned, developed together to generate these long-term revenue adequacy analyses that ultimately help demonstrate a gap. And the big thing here that we're looking to do is create some consistency in the reporting of the information. So as we compile Watford's needs and Williston's needs and Dickinson's, trying to develop and tell a similar story for the West as the state considers things like the gross production tax formula and how that will be effective. We did, in that Williston instance, as an example, last year we had that developed in time for the governor's budget development, and we were able to sit down with the governor's staff and actually run some scenarios. What if the GPT were 40%? What if it were 60-40, as at one time it was proposed? I'd like to think some of our work helped in getting that number all the way to there, but we we couldn't control where oil went in the interim during the legislative process. But at one point it was all the way up to 60, and we were able to show at 60 how would that help Williston. We're looking to do similar type of work on a broader base with this study with the association. Just one last slide here before I turn it back over to Vicki. Really, we're looking at kind of a win-win-win in terms of this information that we develop and how will it be useful. Obviously, and we've spoken with Mr. Kessel at length here earlier today about some of the information that we feel will develop that could be useful for the city long-term, that benchmarking type information and looking at where staff may be needed dependent upon the various forecasts that are developed. That'll be a pretty robust quantification and I believe high-level roadmap for decision-making. The association obviously is looking to compile all of this information to help demonstrate the needs. And so to being able to develop and pull this information from multiple sources beyond just one or two cities is key. And so the association with multiple cities participating is really hoping to better tell the story of what the need is going to be in Western North Dakota. And the state, we're hoping that they benefit from this in terms of clarification and simplification of the data. A lot of times you understand your city and you understand where the needs are at the various and many levels where problems are arising, and no two cities are the same. And so when we talk about commonality in reporting, I'm not talking about creating everyone's story to tell the same or paint the same picture. But what we're looking at there is, like I said, quantifying it in a way that it's understandable across local governments. One last thing I would point out here before I turn it over to Vicki, and just to get a sense for the type of product and outcomes, and this is very high level kind of overview of the work that we did in Williston. We actually presented this work it was in August to the Interim Development and Transmission Committee, and it was quite well received in terms of presenting the needs for Williston here in the upcoming couple bienniums. But this is our baseline gap analysis for Williston, which shows over the next 6 years their total net gap being roughly $287 million. That's a lot different than the $950 million CIP that number is sometimes thrown out there as that's Williston's need. Well, that's not really their need. They have a lot of things that are already solidified in terms of funding sources, and so it's really presenting what's available to them, what's not, and coming up with this gap number like I described earlier. But you can see here, we analyzed it in the terms of revenues and unallocated revenues where they maybe haven't specifically determined their purpose and use yet, but revenue we know we're going to have at their disposal, or they're going to have at their disposal. And this gap analysis is really just above the line, below the line. What revenues are they expected to have that aren't utilized yet, along with the revenues that they have and are utilized to help close the gap below the line. And you can see here that we've got three numbers, roughly $193 million non-allocated revenue for Williston leading up to 2020, and that was based on the last legislative forecast for the gross production tax of roughly $193 million in unallocated GPT revenue, as compared to an operating gap where, in this instance, all the general fund, all the utility enterprise funds, the various major growth impacted funds that were analyzed, roughly 54 million cumulative gap would grow in Williston by 2020 to meet the needs of 460 employees by that time and all the incremental costs that come along with it. And then lastly, all the capital gap, and the biggest thing Williston's dealing with is paying for the new airport, and that's the biggest bar on this graphic. I think they're about $150 million short currently, and looking at various debt financing scenarios for that. But as far as demonstrating that in the cash-based need, that's a big chunk of that $426 million capital gap. Throwing all that into the pot and saying overall, here's how short we expect to be. Here's the things we can do locally to try and fix that, whether it's utility rate increases to get you to the median across the region, whether it's property tax increases that would probably get all of you thrown out of your current seats, those sorts of things. We can analyze all those various scenarios to help demonstrate where it's going to be feasible to use local money and where it's not, and ultimately demonstrating that gap, as I've described it to this point, to those who may not understand it as well as you do within your city at the state level. With that, I'll turn it over to Vicki. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're hoping that you would consider participating in this. It's a 50-50 cost share. The association puts in $25,000, and we'd be asking for $25,000, and see if you'd like to participate. This study will be done by June 30th, 2016, and we're hoping that you would consider our request. Any questions? Sean, do you want to make a few comments from the executive committee level?
Thank you, I do. I appreciate the invitation there. One of the nice things that happened at our committee when we discussed this is Senate Majority Leader Rich Wardner was sitting right next to me, and we had a good conversation. And he really emphasized how important it was for him to be at the meeting where we discussed this. He got some insights into this process that he wouldn't have had otherwise, and was quite supportive of just the state-level impact that was presented by Mr. Gaddy. I also want to mention, because I try to take every advantage I can, our property tax revenue as a revenue stream doesn't pay for our police department. So when people consider property tax as a revenue stream, it covers a very important part of our city operations, but a very small part of our city operations. The other thing I want to mention is these other communities, I'm not sure where you are in your little parade of presentations, but I think you have a couple of the cities yet that you have to garner their support. And so as a board member, we talked a lot about the $125,000 that we were going to invest in this process. And if other cities, we have an idea of how many we'd like to participate in order to make it a valuable tool for the legislators specifically. And if the others don't participate to the level we expect, there may be additional funds available for those that do, which might lower our costs. So I do think this is the type of information that the legislature is expecting. I actually did on my own last year some benchmarking. I did call Bozeman, Minot, West Fargo, got their organizational flow charts so I could do something on a less specific way than what AE2 Access is proposing here. But nevertheless, to try to get some data on what it would be like, what does a city of 40,000 look like, what's a city of 30,000 look like, and what's a city of 60,000 look like, based on the NDSU numbers that we received in terms of our growth pattern. So I know benchmarking is an important way, and I think the right way of going about comparing communities. The biggest issue for us has always been, how big are we going to be and when? Bottom line, it's still going to be those numbers, is how big are we going to be and when are we going to hit those benchmarks. So,
Questions from commissioners, comments? I can't imagine that we won't be interested, but we'll probably look to staff to come back at the next meeting with recommendation and have it on the agenda for the next meeting.
I think it'd be money well spent.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think we need to have this information to go in front of legislature in 2017.
Part of the reason we've been so successful thus far is that we have our 2035 roadmap. We've been sticking to it. We know ballpark costs of what projects are costing, and every time we presented, we've had one of the strongest cases for Dickinson to be able to secure funding. I think this is just another way that we make our story stronger and keep that momentum going.
Commissioner Oltmans, if I may, that leads into a point that we didn't make, is that we've got a lot of studies like the roadmap you mentioned that would be utilized by the firm to hopefully lower our costs. What they provide is an estimate. We don't know the final number, but all the things that we've done already would help to gather this data quicker and thereby making a lower cost.
One detailed question that I have to ask. I don't think I heard it said, but one of the critical things is going to be forecasting servicing of debt. I assume that you've got your PowerPoint down, but the colored chart that I see with the vertical bars, one of those items is going to be servicing debt, I presume.
Right, yes. So we look at things in a lot more granularity than the actual bar colors. That's just a simplification of the overall analysis. We will do a fund-by-fund specific forecast for those that are considered to be truly growth-impacted funds of the city. Obviously, the general fund, obviously the enterprise funds, sales tax funds, those sorts of things. And in any of those instances, if you do have debt service within that fund, we will compile that information and show how those long-term revenues will be utilized to pay for that debt, and also likely pull out, what is the total debt load of the city related to those major sources of revenue.
I know I'm preaching to the choir in this room, but we can't let everybody forget about the debt that we have to accommodate the workers in the oil field, plain and simple.
Well, that's been one of our biggest planning stumbling blocks is just realizing where are we in debt, which projects are absolutely necessary, and how do we get to the end of our roadmap if we don't know the load that we're carrying and how we're going to service that debt. So those are all important aspects of this for each of those funds. And I think that's really the key thing that we've been missing as well. We're close, but this would help finalize that.
If I might just add to that, one thing that I would mention is, for instance, let's say it's a water utility improvement or a water enterprise fund improvement. It may be a very large improvement that if you were to overlay that onto your current user base, that you would need 60-70% increases or something like that in a given year. And that's not realistic. I mean, that's the type of things that we're looking to ferret out. That's a growth impact, is that if you don't have the user base there today to pay for infrastructure that is there to serve tomorrow and beyond, that's things that you just can't feasibly do on your own. And so we will look at incorporating reasonable strategies for local revenue increases, but anything beyond reasonable, and we'll work with you to develop reasonable, whether, like I said, maybe getting to the median of the regional rates in comparison from our North Central Utility Rate Survey. There's some data there that we could use to benchmark to say, we're willing to raise our rates to a certain level, but beyond that, this is where the gap remains in these various funds.
And we have calculated a lot of those numbers ourselves over the last couple of years, so it'll be good to pull them all together. Anything else? Mrs. Steiner, before you leave, just a thank you to the association. I know the association has really been focused these last few years representing cities and counties, and it's really been helpful. So take that back if you would.
Thank you, I will. Thank you.
Okay, we have a 5:45 agenda item with consolidated telephone, but I think we should get Mr. Kessel or Mr. Kubis to introduce this.
Yes, President Jackson, Commissioners. Our 545 is a timetable agenda to discuss a State Avenue fiber relocation. Several months ago, we had approved a change order through the Commission to move some extra dirt along Maryland Way, dirt outside of our right-of-way. As we lowered the grade on State Avenue, those existing lots and along Maryland Way were sitting about 6 feet high. So we had to remove some of that overburden. On the west side of it, consolidated fiber optic lines existed outside of our right-of-way, and that's what makes this kind of unique. We typically don't have items like this on the agenda. Consolidated as a franchised utility in Dickinson would typically move those lines. Most of their lines, or a lot of them, run in our right-of-ways. This one was outside of our right-of-way. They had a pre-existing 40-foot utility easement. To move the project along, Knife River had to coordinate this move with Consolidated and worked around it for some time. In discussion with Consolidated, we had agreed that yes, we needed to lower this line, we would move this line. And some of those costs had increased over what was discussed during the project. And so I've invited Consolidated to come and explain some of the intricacies of this line lowering. It was a fairly extensive lowering of a very large fiber optic line. So I believe there's a representative from Consolidated in the room to discuss the invoice and the process that went into this lowering.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Ross Kuntz. I'm the outside plant manager for Consolidated Telephone. As Craig had stated, I guess just kind of to summarize, this kind of started back conversations in about May of 2014, the potential of city redoing States Avenue up by, is it Maryland Way, I believe. At that point, it wasn't sure if Mr. Cook was going to pay for that, if the city was, so on and so forth. So as time went on, it became agreed upon that the city would pay for, we had seven or eight pedestals from the corner of 21st all the way up that had to be moved and relocated. And then we also had an 8 fiber on one side of the highway, a 12 fiber on another that were there from like 1989, 90. And then we had an 8-way duct bank, that's the 40-foot right-of-way Craig's talking about, all 3 outside the right-of-way. So what we did, just so you're aware, is consolidated, is instead of billing the city for relocating this 12 fiber, which is basically antiquated, it's too small. We had a lot of live equipment on it, fit all our exchanges. We rerouted through a different part of town. No costs are even in here for that portion. Then we took the 8 fiber, we basically cut it over a different cable, and we did put those costs in just of the night cut. So instead of basically being 40, 50,000, it was like 5, 6 for that portion. That wasn't the bulk of this. So then we talked to Craig, and somewhere in the course, my engineering firm is Cattermist, Lee & Jackson, the telecom division out of Bismarck. I had Steve Zachmeyer, who's worked for me for years, give me an estimate on what he thought it would cost to move all these pedestals and lower this duct bank for the city. So just kind of keep this in mind. That number that I was given roughly last fall was $76,000 that he emailed me. Talked to Craig, thought maybe we could even get it down to $60,000. Well, as time went on, we didn't come even close, and the reasons for that are, so the first lowering portion on Maryland Way, due to the cut and the way the back slope of the road and ditch were, we had to drop that 8-way duct bank 15 feet. Well, when you start getting into 15 feet, you have 2 choices. You either have to hire an engineer to give you an engineered trench, because we had to cut this all live. There's no cutting and replacing, resplicing. This was all our main 432 ribbon fiber, so hundreds of thousands of dollars in fiber. You either had to do that, or you had to make 2 swaths to lower this duct bank. So that's what we agreed upon would be much cheaper, would be to do the 2 paths. Well, then we ran into, there was the, I don't know if it's the city or the private water line that fed Mr. Cook's development. So, long story short, we were up there back and forth no less than 5 times in conversations, had equipment sitting, we're getting billed for, so on and so forth, till we could come to an agreement. Finally, Craig just asked us, Master Construction, who does water work in Fargo, if they would just cap that water line. That's probably only, I don't have a number, it's not broke out, but a very minimal amount on all this. The lowering of the water line basically, or of the 8-way duct bank, cost double what my engineers had anticipated. And then the next step was, when we moved all the pedestals back, by the time we got them moved back farther into private, when you're talking a 432 ribbon and stripping conduit, keeping it live and coiling it, it's very susceptible to damage. So that labor took twice as long as we had anticipated also. So basically where we were at is, by the end of the day, my original quote was around $76,000. The bill has come in at $106,000. That is without our GIS funds to put it in the map. That'll probably be another $6,000, but that won't come out till April. I didn't want to make the city wait. So what I did is, I guess I approached my management team and said, look, we quoted them 76. We feel partially responsible. How can we be off by $30,000? So basically what we did is I called Craig and I said, let's split the difference. We'll eat $15,000, because I wish our quote would have been more accurate. We work with the city. You're our customer. We're here. So I just didn't want to just send Craig an email and go, wow, he can have a heart attack now. It's $30,000 more than I told him. So what I'm asking for, I guess, is $91,556.39 was that last pay estimate before the $106,000 one came in. So I was looking for the city to agree to split the difference, pay the $91,000, and I just wanted to explain why it's $15,000 more than I ever told Craig it would be, basically. That's kind of the short story on this project. And I would like to add one more thing, I guess, which is, I did send, I don't know if you guys have them, I sent all the pay estimates and paperwork from KLJ on this, so you guys would see, there's 0 markup. We incurred $106,000 expense, all on private, on this deal, so.
And essentially, those expenses were master expenses?
Those expenses were Master Construction and KLJ Engineering Supervision. $28,000 of it was KLJ Engineering and Design to reroute and get out of your way, basically.
And maybe you said it, Mr. Kubis, but I think we have already approved the change order for all the earthwork that was involved. That's a done deal.
everything that was a contract item for the earthwork, correct, is already approved and paid for through the Knife River contract. One thing I would add, that there was probably more work involved here than even this. This was just a city portion, and what we had agreed was that there was some developer cost involved with lowering a different portion of this line, still same line paralleling State Avenue. This was just the line that paralleled State Avenue in a previously platted subdivision, where we had adjusted the grade line through this area, really rendering these lots unbuildable if we'd have left them as they were. They were, 6 feet higher than the new roadway now.
Any other questions? Mr. Kuntz or Mr. Kubus?
I guess I just appreciate you coming in and actually explaining everything. We got so many change orders that are just the written form, and you hope that the math was correct, and you hope that the reason or the basis for it was accurate. It's kind of refreshing to have someone come in and actually explain the process and where the billing went, and accepting some responsibility and wanting to split the difference. So thank you for that.
Was it your intent, Mr. Kessler, that we approve this tonight, that we act on this tonight?
We're hopeful that you'll act on it tonight.
Okay, any other questions then, or discussion?
So this was budgeted through the Knife River contract, initially 78,000, 76,000?
Commissioner Decker, no, it wasn't budgeted through the Knife River contract. Typically, how that works is if there's utilities in our right-of-way, and if this line would have been in our right-of-way, which it could have been, as they're franchised and they're authorized to be in our right-of-way, Consolidated moves those at their cost, and that's what MDU or Rough Rider or Mid-Continent, our franchised utilities. This one sat outside of our right-of-way in easements from 1989, I guess. So those costs, while it's still Knife River's responsibility to coordinate, that's how our contracts are written, to coordinate with that utility company and effect the lowering or the relocation of the utility. The contractor isn't responsible for the cost. And in this case, being outside of the right-of-way, the city takes on that responsibility.
I don't think anybody has an issue with recognizing that this was a cost, that was a project cost that had to be done. Difficulty comes in missing the amount, and that's why you're here. So the fact that we had to do the work wasn't an issue. It's just that.
So to further explain that, the project was budgeted, this is the State Avenue project, at, give me a moment here, please. It was $8.35 million. The project got bid, it was awarded at just rough numbers, $7.67 million, and then there's been about $200,000 of change orders. And so the project cost for Knife River's contract now is $7.91 million. And this is above and beyond what was the amended contract with Knife River, but still under the $8.35 million.
So there's money there. There's still money there.
There's still money there, and you know, it's a unforeseen but budgeted amount as a contingency, a project contingency.
So we need a motion to address the $91,000 cost with Consolidated.
Do you have wording for it?
I think we're simply approving
Approving paying the bill?
Right.
the invoice, the change order
I will
invoice.
I will make that motion. Second.
Any more discussion? If not, we will vote Mr. Oltman's.
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel.
Aye.
Mr. Decker.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. The motion carries. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, we will go back to our regular agenda, and we're going to hear reports from Mr. Kessel, or maybe Ms. Nominick first, huh?
Ms. Nominack will be first to provide the monthly hiring journal report.
Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners. First off on our list is police officer. At this time, we do have 2 police officer positions open, and we have done our first round of interviews. We will be doing second round real soon on those 2 positions. Fire Department Administrative Assistant, I may have reported on this already. I'm not certain if I have, but we have filled that position. It was a new position for this year. We have just recently done interviews for 2 firefighter openings that were for 2016. We will be hiring 1 in January and 1 in July, and we did hold those interviews. We're still in the interview process. Sanitation operator, we have 1 route operator position. I believe interviews were held today for that. Sanitation landfill, we have 1 more position that we need to fill out there at the landfill. Street operator, we had 1 opening, and then we have 2 for 2016 that we are going to be hiring. That position is open at this time, so we've got a few days left on that. Street and fleet operations manager, we did have that one open. We were unsuccessful at filling that position, and we'll reopen. Right now, we didn't feel that was the right time with the holidays to be posting and advertising a position for that, but we will be getting that open real soon. Museum coordinator just closed on Friday. We'll be scheduling interviews for that sometime after the holiday here. The curator position closes on January 1st, and we're getting a good number of applications for that. City engineer, we will need to reopen that position. We are looking at pursuing a hiring agency for the city engineer position and the deputy city administrator position. Water reclamation manager, we did make an offer and it was accepted, so we have made a hire there. Wastewater treatment plant operator, we have 1 opening there, and the position just recently closed, so we'll be doing the interviews for that real soon. All the other positions that we have open right now that we are not advertising are positions for 2016 that we'll start looking at filling after the new year. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Nominick. Any questions concerning this report? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Kessel?
Thank you, President Johnson. I have 2 items that I'd like to talk about this evening. The first is the 2016 budget reforecast. You heard tonight a lot of numbers before you today. You'll hear them again at the special city commission meeting. But I think it's in our best interest to look at our 2016 revenue forecast specifically. We've experienced a large decrease in the price of oil, and that affects us in many different ways. As you've been tracking, you've noticed that the sales tax revenues dropped, hospitality tax revenues dropped. So what we want to do is take an internal look at that budget. We create that in July. Essentially, you guys accept it in September. So there's a great many months that pass between the creation of that budget and then the execution of that budget. We just want to make sure we're on the path. If the revenue forecasts don't appear to support the expense budget, then we're going to go deeper. Then we're going to start looking at the expense side of that budget. But we want to start with the revenue side and then report back to you what our findings are. So just as more of an FYI that this is our intention, and we hope to bring that number to you in January. The next item is just a reminder, the special commission meeting that'll be held on the 28th. A special note is the time change. We are now scheduled at an 8:30 a.m. meeting. We were at an afternoon meeting. And I do anticipate that we'll have more than just the item regarding financial adjustments that we do every year. We could potentially have a small land sale, the hiring agencies that Ms. Nominack mentioned, appointments to various boards and commissions that we do before the end of the year, and the KLJ contract for engineering that extension may be on that agenda item as well. So just a reminder that there'll be a few more than just simply the financial adjustment item that we generally have. And since it is a special meeting, we can only talk about those items that appear on that agenda item. We can't deviate from that agenda at all. With that, that concludes my report this evening.
Okay, I'm really glad that we're doing this budget reforecast. I think we have to be careful taking too much comfort in what we really did 6 months ago. I know we formally approved the budget around the 1st of October, but the work was done earlier than that. And as fast as everything is changing right now, I think this is really important. So I'm glad we're doing this. Any other questions for Mr. Kessel? If not, we will move to Public Safety and Chief Seebach reports.
Good evening, President Jackson and City Commissioners. Just a couple of brief reports for you this evening. I'd like to bring you up to speed on our annual workforce safety and insurance audit of the city safety program. We again were successful in the managing of our safety management program portion of that program, and we received a 10% premium discount, or will be receiving a 10% premium discount for successfully completing all of the elements of that portion. Also, the drug-free workplace program, which was new for us last year as far as our taking part in it, we successfully completed all the elements of that for an additional 5% premium reduction. So a total of 15% premium reduction is what we'll be looking at going into 2016, and we're very pleased that it worked out that way for us. In addition to that, I want to just mention to you a couple of responses we've had, a couple of incidents we've had that I believe really show or reinforce that we did the right thing with the public safety facility, in the need for the facility and recognizing the need in the community and in recognizing the placement of it. We've had several incidents actually that have brought the public safety facility, or what we're referring to as Station 2, into play. But one of those that was really interesting that I shared with the management team was a vehicle fire in Sundance Coves. The vehicle was in a garage as part of a townhouse complex, a tuck-under garage of a townhouse. Staff that was available at Station 2 at the public safety facility responded immediately with that apparatus that we have up there, while staff that was available at the downtown station, Station 1, as we're referring to that now, responded also. The truck from Station 2 was on scene and had water on the fire by the time the truck from downtown got there, which really, I think, it made a big hit. We made a big, fast hit on that fire, which really minimized the damage to that structure. And I think that that's a great example of what we needed to do on that end of town. Additionally, although there have been others where just that truck rolled on incidents on the north end of town, we had a situation one evening just about a week ago where we had a simultaneous event, two different events happening at exactly the same time. We had a vehicle accident in the 1000 block of Sims, where the law enforcement personnel on scene thought that there was a possibility of a vehicle fire. At the same time, we had a gas leak in a commercial structure on the north end of town. We were able to respond from two different locations with two different apparatus, with two different crews simultaneously, and handled both events at the same time. It's something that doesn't happen frequently, but something that absolutely can, and I'm sure will continue as the city of Dickinson continues to grow. Both of those, I think, just underline that we've done the right thing with the public safety facility, and the proof is in the responses. It's working. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? Chief Seebach? Thanks very much. Okay, Mr. Kubas, you have a couple of items for us, engineering tonight.
Thank you, President Jackson, Commissioners. The first item is a transportation alternatives program, an application that's due to the DOT by the end of the year. Typically, this is projects that involve trails and a few other miscellaneous types of items. This used to be the Transportation Enhancement Program. City staff has met with the Dickinson Park districts about a joint application for a trail project, and in your packet were 3 priority projects that the Park District had taken a look at. In visiting with them, city staff would recommend that if we proceed with an application, to proceed with priority project number 1, which runs along 21st Street East and 10th Avenue East, connecting Highway 22 to the pedestrian bridge on 10th Avenue East. In this area, I would say there's almost no sidewalk in this entire corridor. There have been a few pieces of sidewalk that have been installed recently this summer, but beyond that, it's essentially no sidewalk along that corridor. It would tie the trail together that's along Highway 22 that runs in front of the Prairie Hills Mall and extends north really to the edge of town to 29th Street. And then again, like I had mentioned, ties in with the trail that goes over the I-94 10th Avenue East Bridge. I had put an estimate in your packet of a ballpark estimate of a $600,000 project. The Park District had just recently today supplied me with an estimate that they had put together that was closer to $850,000. Regardless of the cost, the funding limit per project would be $290,000 set by the DOT. So in the numbers I had given you at $600,000, that was about a 48% local share. At $850,000, it'd be closer to 2/3 local share. I would recommend that if we move forward with the application, shortly thereafter, we would enter into some form of a memorandum of understanding with the Park Districts on funding the project itself. The Park District has agreed to undertake the cost of putting this application together to submit to the DOT, however. So I think it's a great project. It really fills in a very large gap in the trail system in town. One other thing I'd like to mention that wasn't in the memo is that this would be for a 2017 construction project. As it's a DOT project, it really needs to go through their full environmental process. So this application round is for development and design during 2016 and then construction in 17. So with that, I'd open up to any questions you'd have.
And where are we finding the money for our ship?
Well, right now, I believe we have money set aside, I think it's called in the street budget, but for a line item for trails. Mr. Kessel might have more info on that.
Part of the sales tax revenues?
Correct. We've set aside dollars for trail systems. We have the Crooked Crane Trail scheduled for 2016. But with the amount of dollars that are needed, we shouldn't have any issues as long as revenues come in as we expect with funding a portion of this.
Do we know what our balance is in that trails line item?
I think as you saw this evening, there's $600,000 in that item specifically for trails. There's one other item that comes out of that fund. So I can't tell you the exact breakdown of that 600, but that's the trail fund that we have available to us today, a portion of that.
Okay. Well, the only other thing I would question is when we all know using federal funds, the project becomes a little more cumbersome. And when we only have a third of it being federal funds, makes me wonder a little bit. But the application could go in and see where it falls. Any other questions?
Our packet doesn't, at least on priority 1, is it a 10-foot wide? Like priority 2 says it's 10-foot wide. And we're talking basically straight line sidewalks, right?
Well, I think in areas, we have existing development alongside a lot of this corridor. There's some open areas where we'd have some ability to do some things. If you can picture the area by Sachs Motors, it drops off fairly steep off to the south. So there you might be confined to a straight line along the curb line or just behind the curb line. There's other areas though when you get further east though, I think you can set back a little bit from the road, do some meandering.
Do we have easement to do that?
The right-of-way should be there. There's more right-of-way on 21st Street than on 10th Avenue East, but the city has all the right-of-way through that. It's all platted ground. The Park District actually has a piece of property that's right as you turn the corner on 10th Avenue East, just south of 21st Street. So that's the alternative you have there. I think there was just some thoughts that they have I don't know what the thought was back when that was platted, but there is kind of a corridor of parkland through there that they might want to do something to connect. It's called Fisher Park.
Right.
There. And then I think that was more of a brainstorming thought and then come back and connect it to 10th Avenue East. But yes, all 10-foot trails, that's one of those requirements. Using federal aid, it has to be 10 foot wide.
And are we talking lighting is figured into this project?
These costs wouldn't include lighting on them. They could, again, being limited. I think we have some amount of lighting out there on 10th Avenue East and on 21st Street, but it's probably pretty sparse once you get out of the curb and gutter section. East of 4th Avenue East.
Once you get to across from Rough Rider there all the way down to 10th, the lighting is not going to be adequate.
Yeah,
there's going to be required lighting.
A light at the intersection.
Right.
So, again, it wasn't included in these cost estimates. It could be. There would be no, as we're maxed out on our federal aid, it would be a city cost. But
Okay, we're okay moving forward with the application, I presume?
Yes.
If the grant is offered, we'll have to formally accept that grant.
Right.
Okay, I think you can go ahead, Mr. Kubas. And you have one more item here.
I do. Again, the DOT annually solicits projects. In your packet, I think the letter is called or headed Solicitation for Urban Roads Projects in the year 2020. Really, it's an annual opportunity for the city to assess the projects we have in our STIP, which are the federal aid projects we would have in the statewide transportation improvement plan. In that plan for the upcoming year is Museum Drive in 2016. That project is under design already, going through the environmental process at the DOT, scheduled for bid letting this coming spring. Then we have East Villard in 2017 and 8th Street South in 2018. We've talked about these projects. Most of them have been on the list for many, many years. We've jockeyed some things around as other projects have came up that we've done. But especially the East Villard project has been on the list for many years. If you can see in the spreadsheet, it's very small, the PDF we get from the DOT, but after these projects in 2017 and 2018, it leaves us with a fairly large negative balance of our urban roads funds, which the DOT said that they have some flexibility because they're looking at this on a statewide basis. Dickinson just being a small piece of that federal aid that the North Dakota DOT receives. But in reality, we can't continue to keep building projects with a negative balance. That the DOT would come back and say, well, we can't extend any more monies to the city of Dickinson. Some other cities and counties want to do federal aid projects. So I guess I'd like your input on the two projects we have upcoming. I think Museum Drive is fairly set. And then we have East Villard, and that's from Base Flug Trailer, would extend all the way out to Energy Drive, really. Again, a project that's been on the list for many years, and for whatever reason, it keeps getting punted down the road. And then the 8th Street South, we've had a lot of discussion on that too, as it pertains to truck routes mostly, but understanding that pavement needs some work. So that was another project we wanted to keep on the list, but hold off until the State Avenue Railroad Bridge is done and complete, and all the traffic can utilize that during construction of 8th Street South, especially 8th Street Southeast. So I guess there are some other projects too that we've looked at, and I've included them here just for discussion. Sims Street, South of Museum, 10th Avenue West, north of the interstate, really north of 15th Street, up to 21st Street. and then 12th Street West, from where the concrete pavement ends, all the way to State Avenue. And there's probably many, many others that would, fit in that list of just need some pavement maintenance. But again, with the projects we have, we're running a negative balance, so, my recommendation for right now on 2020 is that we can not prioritize a project in there. We'll have this opportunity again this time of year, next year, to reprioritize, add projects. So it's a fairly fluid program. You have one time a year, though, to readjust it.
Go ahead.
Mr. Kubus, the projects that lie outside of the urban roads funding, projects we may want to do in the coming 5-6 years, we're probably looking at sales tax revenues for those projects.
Sales tax revenues, we've discussed the potential of using special assessments more to fund projects like that. And then, the oil impact dollars is what we've, in the last year is what we've really funded those types of projects with.
I guess what I'm getting at, the more I think about it, I wonder if we shouldn't be trying to swap the Villard Street project out of federal funding, use sales tax monies or whatever for that project, and bring another simpler project into the schedule for federal dollars. The Villard Street project east is going to be a really difficult, messy project, and adding the federal constraints won't make it any simpler.
And it's also really large. We still receive just shy of $1 million a year in federal aid, and this is, I don't even have the number in front of me. It's a multi-million-dollar, $7-8 million project. Even on our 20% share of that, it chews up, and that really results in this negative balance that we carry forward for years. It's akin to the State Avenue Bridge project, that trying to use our urban roads funds to build that bridge over the last probably 20 years, we just, as a city, could never get there with the dollars we would get through the urban roads funding. So oil impact dollars on that one really made that project happen, and it might be a good idea. We have all the freedom in the world to use our local dollars on urban roads. It's just like you said, President Jackson, that when you use the federal dollars, there's certain additional constraints that come with the project and other environmental engineering that we typically wouldn't have to go through all the DOT processes.
But I'm hearing you say that for now, we probably can go forward the way the STIP is laid out, give it a more studied look a year from now, and make changes as needed.
Yeah, I think along with looking at our capital plan is probably budget reforecasting, and then that plays heavily into what we're able to do on the CIP end of things too, not only the operational budgets, but our capital project budgets too.
Everybody okay with moving forward with that stance?
Yes. Yeah.
That's all I had, unless anyone had any questions for the engineering department.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kubus. We have a planning item tonight. Mr. Hadley?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. We have a future land use map amendment, ordinance 1602. It's the second reading of that. It's from residential to commercial up in the Diamond Acres subdivision along 21st. There haven't been any changes or comments made, and staff would recommend approval.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Hadley? This is the second reading of an ordinance, so we'll ask if there's anybody from the public who'd like to comment on this ordinance 1602. Please come forward. Anybody from the public? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion from commissioners.
Make a motion to approve second reading, final passage of ordinance 1602.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Oltmans?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, that motion carries. Okay, the only other thing we have On the agenda tonight is the city administrator contract. Before we do that, this is the time of year that we do Mr. Kessel's evaluation. This is the only evaluation of staff that we do publicly at a meeting. I know Mr. Kessel really enjoys it every year as we do this. What I will do is explain the process a little bit. Should give one of those to Mr. Kessel also.
Thank you.
Did I give Cindy my marked up copy?
Yep.
So that the public is aware of what we do, we have an evaluation form that actually has been used for a great number of years. I'll try to summarize that in a couple, 3 minutes here if I can. We look at, we evaluate Mr. Kessel's performance with 7 different categories: leadership, management, job knowledge, communication skills, professional development, relationship building with both the city employees as well as the community. And we grade his performance in 3 different categories: whether he exceeds his expectations, the expectations we have of him, whether he meets those expectations, or whether he does not meet the expectations. The summary of this year's evaluation, we had no marks in the category of does not meet the expectations. We had only 5 marks that he meets his expectations. The rest were all marks that he exceeded our expectations in his performance of his job. We asked commissioners for comments. I don't think I should try to read them all, but I'll read a sampling. In the category of leadership, Mr. Kessel, now these are the comments that came from commissioners regarding Mr. Kessel's performance. Mr. Kessel meets expectations of articulating and developing the City of Dickinson's visions. He's very productive in getting city staff to conduct city business. He astutely shepherds big picture aspects of city government and is tireless in pursuing his administrative duties. Some of the management comments, Kessel seems to emphasize staff communication and exhibits quick response as issues and new initiatives arise. Mr. Kessel does an excellent job in the planning, reporting, and organizing city business. Job knowledge, Sean and his team have done a great job of staying on top of the changing dynamics on the local, state, and national level. He's well aware of the task at hand and does a great job of communicating this to the commission. Communication skills, this is always his strongest point. He thinks quickly on his feet and communicates effectively. Sean continues to be a strong voice for our community. Professional development, he's energetic in his involvement with the community and across North Dakota. He's very involved in making sure his skill set and professional development is keeping up with the changing dynamics of the job. Relationship building with city employees. Kessel seems to be open with staff and emits a professional aura. He sets a desirable tone with those around him, a comment that this might be a weakest area. I'd like to see more retention, better communication, creating an atmosphere where the City of Dickinson becomes a premier entity to work for our community. Relationship building with the community. There have been some innovative steps taken to foster knowledge in the community regarding our tremendous growth. He conducts himself in a professional manner as a city representative, and I can go on and on here. Maybe some of my fellow commissioners want to emphasize some of the comments that were made. So that is the evaluation. It's a great evaluation, Mr. Kessel. I think you should be proud of what generally folks are saying at this table about your performance. With that, we have a contract that you all received in your packet that we need to approve tonight. Of course, I suppose the item we want to talk about most is the salary Again, as we have done in the past, Mr. Oltmans and I formed a committee of two to look at that salary. We compared it to other city administrators around the state. We compared it to other positions in Dickinson that are public positions, that compensation for those positions are made public. What we're proposing tonight, and maybe I should back up a little bit here, if you recall, about 6 weeks ago, we adopted a new salary schedule for non-exempt, for exempt staff. And of course, we looked at that salary schedule as we looked at this. So the bottom line is we're proposing a salary of $142,000, which is an $8,000 increase from the last salary, something 5.9 some percent, just under 6%. That compares very modestly, in my opinion, to some of the other positions that are comparable around the state, in our own community. And frankly, since you and I met, I would even be open to a higher number, but that is the number that we came up with. And I presented that number to Mr. Kessel in meeting with him. I know personally that I'm very glad Mr. Kessel is our administrator. He'd probably be the first one to admit that he makes a mistake once in a while. If you don't admit it, we'll point them out to you if you'd like.
That looks
he does
in the
a great
meeting
job
way
for
too
us,
long.
and I'm very proud that he's our administrator.
I would echo that, and I would echo that, you and I not only went back through the evaluations, we did compare other salaries. I was more conservative on my approach. But I think you and I were both mindful of wanting the increase to shadow or at least mirror that what other employees within the city would be receiving as well. And I think that was kind of the important benchmark that we started with, is that we wanted to keep his increase in line with what other city employees are realizing. I think that when you're the head of the city employees and you're the voice for them to the city commission, you want to remain respectful of where their salary increases are going to be as well. I think that was probably our only contention on hammering out the final salary, but I was very comfortable with the percentage that we went with. It was based on performance, it was based on evaluations, and I think it was also based broadly on what other people in his position throughout the community, county, and the state would be realizing too. So I feel very comfortable with where we arrived at the number.
There are a couple of other numbers that I failed to mention. In the new salary schedule, the midpoint in the range that Mr. Kessler falls in is just under $150,000. The salary schedule, compared to the old schedule, was a 21% increase on the schedule itself. Mr. Kessel's increases the last 2 years have averaged a little bit over 6%. Any other comments or questions concerning the contract? Now we're looking for a motion.
I would make the motion to offer the contract to Mr. Kessel.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? If not, we will vote. Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Oltmans?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. Let's see. Any items from commissioners? Any other items from commissioners before we close the meeting? I would like to ask, could we send out the PowerPoint on the downtown to each of us?
Sure. Yep,
Electronic?
that's not a problem at all.
Okay. Any issues from anybody in the audience? Anybody in the audience like to address the commission tonight? Okay, I see none. With that, I want to say Merry Christmas to everybody at this table. I also think it's an appropriate time of the year to thank our staff for what they do. You know, there's a lot of people sitting in the back of the room here tonight that really don't get thanked enough. And there's a lot of people not sitting in the back of the room, whether it's fire, police, public works, I don't care. And I think everybody listening to us on TV tonight just need to know how hard everybody works for this city. And then I would say Merry Christmas to those people listening to us on TV. I think we're really blessed with the city that we have in Dickinson. We should really be grateful. We have our problems, we have our challenges, but we're pretty lucky, I think, to be in Dickinson. With that, we'll look for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.